the Jambanya said, the Korakin, the Shuru, just another Jambanya said, and then Janjusemba Namki Lamyam Neche La Dambo, and the Janjusemba Solam Genera so Jambanya said, Zorusiam the Nangore, said Jambanya said, Daddy. Jambanija City, Dangazuki, Dingitsin and Della Mibigi, Dingitsin Daddy, Nikasore, Uji Jebachipi, Sheriffs Delacova, Zadangazuki, Pajan Dugi, Yamnegi, Gishi, do many that the Gasore, Dina, Lelias of Chegorocasa, Sheraki Pajan Yamnado Chagua, Dingitsina, Dingitsin Yamneda, and the Sheraki Yamnesa Chagua. All the Digor, Mazuki. The dish I go to share. Chisada, Jambanya, Slayon, and Digi, and me body the carriores, Jambanya, you carry me gores, and me atelier, Luda, Towada, and it's Semna, Che said, or didn't you shield me or you dish, said, all kissing on the dish.
Good morning. So today we come to the second session of looking at the 4 close placements of mindfulness. So the 4 close placements of mindfulness, the actual practice that is a close placement of mindfulness for bodhisattvas starts with the achievement of the bodhisattva path of accumulation. And this practice is, despite its title of being a close placement of mindfulness, is actually a practice of mindfulness together with wisdom. And as this is in the continuum of a bodhisattva, the wisdom that is being referred to is the perfection of wisdom that is being done together with mindfulness on the paths from the path of bodhisattva's path of accumulation. And last time, in our first session, we looked at the observed objects, or the objects that the mind is placed on. And there were 4, with the first being that of the body, that of feelings, and thirdly that of the mind, and fourthly that of phenomena, with all with their own subdivisions.
Ludelia, and the Luce, the Lusum Cherva, Nangi Luciada, and the Chi Lucina Niki Luce, Yavara Kevasum Che. Lady, then Soa said, not Soa de la Ya, and Soa Devata Dunga Danyum said Niche. Then the same said, the same to Sem Chasalia, and number Shiva Chasan, same che. Che se la Chögyi Nalalia, that Mangurwa, Bene Soa Suda, Soa Dang, and same main big Sheba Chasan and a Chögyi do you and a divination Sheba than Su main big Dimitichi Chasan Chögyi Nala the main big the Tapa Rick Chasan Chögyi Nala Chögyi Labion dinner that Mangoji or dinner.
Last time then we looked at the divisions of the 4 observed objects. So for the first observed object, that of the body, there are 3 divisions. So there's the all form that is outer to the body. So that is the first outer body, and it refers to form including not just material form, physical form, but also sound, smell, taste, and so forth. Then secondly was the inner form of the sense powers and so forth. And then the third division was the form that is both inner and outer. So we looked at, or the body, that is both inner and outer. So that's what we looked at last time in some detail in terms of the observed object of the body. Then we briefly refer to the following, the next 3, that being of feelings with its 3 subdivisions of happy feelings or pleasant feelings, secondly suffering or unpleasant feelings, and thirdly neutral feelings. And then of mind, we mentioned briefly that there are 6 divisions, the 6 different types of primary consciousnesses or main minds. And then with phenomena, the 4th observed object that also has 3 subdivisions, but within these 3 subdivisions are found a vast array of phenomena. So the first were all mental factors other than feelings, because feelings was mentioned before. And then secondly, non-associated compound phenomena, which are all impermanent phenomena other than consciousness and matter. And then thirdly, all permanent phenomena. So you can see just what a vast number of phenomena are included within these 3 subdivisions of the observed objects of phenomena.
And so, and the Nigi Solamba Chigumore, that the answer Digo Society, di Solambi ko Lam Yamji, so the Shikor, so the Shikore, most shared, so Digor Shikore. Janjusemba Lam Telaya, Janjusemba Telekarium Gresene, Nyanduig Lambda Rajelam Lobsang Dorje Majatambone, Jam Nijokum Janjusem Geje, Gideon Janjusemba Solamba Chigore, Della Janjusemba Ringela or Ringeba Suda, Tambone. She's not Denige Janjusembe Lam Yamlenchita, that it is she and also shared the Digor Shigor, Shula, Nishandai or Shigor, and also the Shigor.
We approach this text from the perspective of a bodhisattva who newly acquires the Mahayana path of accumulation, which means that this is a bodhisattva of definite lineage, which in itself means that they have never trained in the paths of the hero or solitary realizer. Rather, this particular practitioner is of definite Mahayana lineage. And then when they attain their very first path of accumulation, it is the bodhisattva path of accumulation. So explicitly or manifestly, it is for such practitioners that we are approaching this text. Implicitly, it would also include, or also refer to those of the hero and solitary realizer lineage.
Dina Solam Yineraso, Jamba Nyashi, so in a Kumgore says she had it. Tesugi Janjusemba, Tesugi, Solamine, Yamlenche, so the Carcio, Jamba Nyashadi, so in a Kumgores.
Where the 4 close placements of mindfulness are mainly practiced will be from the path of accumulation of a bodhisattva.
That's all I mean. Also, Jamba Nyashi, watch your Kumgo, Carson Kumgore Lamna. She's a conjugate, Tompany let me be Shine Juvia, Tompany let me be Shinading, and Tompany let me be Lauton Juvia, it's all Kumgurwa. She's a Tompany let me be Tompany let me be Shine Juvia, and Tompany let me be and Shineg and she lost on Lauton Juche, she lost on the Tukura Dinza, Tompany let me be Shine to Comyazo, Tompany let me be Shine eating and Tompany let me be Lauton Kiek, Dandala, it's all Kumgore.
This is because when a bodhisattva is on the path of accumulation, they have as a primary observed object that of emptiness. And what they're doing on the path of accumulation is trying firstly to hold their realization of emptiness with the unwavering mind of calm abiding. When that's achieved, they're trying to also be able to investigate the object of emptiness that they're holding with calm abiding with the analytical mind of meditative insight, trying to achieve the union of calm abiding and meditative insight on this subtle observed object that is emptiness. So this is a primary practice of the bodhisattva who has achieved the path of accumulation. And therefore, this is where primarily the training in the 4 close placements of mindfulness, or the actual training of the 4 close placements of mindfulness, commences from.
That's all about the lam ya complete change teaching you jolam se toku guru ba jisa di teaching you jolam tawala domba ni la mi bi shila songji yema topna yula ma yena teaching jolam toku ma jisa inji minji teaching jolam yula gyawala domba ni la mi bi shila songji ki toku guru jisa janju semba solam ba di ki domba ni la mi bi shila songji shinen drup shinen di ngane domba ni la mi bi la dong drup je den la dong di 제 용도 아니고 졸람 토도 그래 맞아 니 라동 동반이를 비 신의 디 안에 동반이를 미비 라동 마도 바도 졸람 토고 말이야 지나다 졸람 게디 토그를 랍나 그 동반이를 비 신의 디 안에 동반이를 비 라동 주제 라동 게디 제바이네 니 라동 제용도 네그 졸람 바 차도 그래.
So the reason why the Bodhisattva is striving here to cultivate the four close placements of mindfulness is in order to achieve their goal of becoming a Buddha, or to express that differently, to achieve the final path, the fifth path, that of no more training. They have now achieved the first of the 5 paths, that of accumulation. So they are striving to achieve the second path, the path of preparation. And what is it that marks the boundary for crossing the Bodhisattva, crossing from the Bodhisattva path of accumulation to the Bodhisattva path of preparation? It is when they are able to place the union, the mind that is the union of calm abiding and meditative insight on the subtle observed object of emptiness. So when they achieve the path of accumulation, they will be then trying to take their attainment of calm abiding and place it on this subtle object of emptiness. When that is achieved, they will try and take their attainment of their prior attainment of. So when they have taken their prior attainment of calm abiding and now newly placing it on the subtle object of emptiness, when that has been achieved, they then take their prior attainment of meditative insight and try and place that on the subtle object of emptiness, without losing their calm abiding. So they go through this process, and when they are eventually able to achieve the union of calm abiding and meditative insight, which they will have previously achieved, but now onto this subtle object of emptiness, that is when they progress from the Bodhisattva path of accumulation to the path of preparation.
당한저 메니 다 년도기 람려야 년도당 랑지 람 롭정 체제 근데 년도기 초람로 규례게 되네 당보냐 람냠내 지들다 년도기 람 롭정 체제 년도기 초람로게 년도기 조람다 되네 마토바 년도기 초람 중무로지 톱 아디나세 랑지 람 롭정 체제 랑지 람 초람 중무로 톱 안에 되네게 톱되기가 엔디젤이야 안에 타바치베 기회 신이지 체제 된 타바치베 최바 직 송요데 데라 이초체 되네 다 타바치베 최라 잠니제 로정제제 타바치베 최라야 냠네 제로한 중으로와 제가 년뒤게 람솔람 중으로 톱제 솔람 딩다 되네게 로 마토가제 솔람 중으로 톱제 제라 어다고 타바치베 최 직녀요도 안 데라야 배 이초가 오지오지오제 되네 어다등에 타바치베 최 직인세네 되네 잠니제 곰 타바치베 최제 안 자주세바 자주심 기회도 제 솔람바 차르고와 디나신 데네게 솔람바 디기야 지바레 가서는 디가서 태진이 가서 태진 솔람 가서 대 람님네 지도 조 잠반예샤들 로초지고 그래서는 그 돈이를 미베실라 손데 게요마 토요 말에 세상마 토반장 그 돈이 또 유기를 되네 다 돈이를 미베실라 손을 토베체도 안에 디가서다 솔람이 가서 다 잠반예샤시 안 좋으냐면 난 거래지래 대디다 디서 지바체 거래
So that is how a practitioner who is definite in lineage of the bodhisattvas will train when they've achieved the path of accumulation. For someone of the hero solitary realizer lineage who achieves the Hinayana or the Thevadan path of accumulation, but then and the path of accumulation has 3 subdivisions. First the small is achieved, thereafter the middling, and then the great. And after the great level, the path of accumulation, comes the path of preparation. So when someone of hero or solitude realized lineage achieves the Theravadan path of accumulation, and on that first level, the small level, should they then meet a Mahayana teacher and be inspired by the Mahayana Dharma and give rise to the determination to generate the minds of love and compassion and bodhicitta in their continuum, they have already achieved the Theravadan path of accumulation, but now their main training will be in cultivating love and compassion in order to generate bodhicitta, and when they do, they will then achieve the Mahayana path of accumulation. And from that point, when they now enter the Mahayana path of accumulation, they will train in exactly the same way was mentioned in the previous segment. In the previous segment, we referred to a practitioner who was of definite lineage, of the Bodhisattva lineage, which means they didn't first enter the Theravadan paths. Now, in the second segment, we're talking about someone who is of indefinite lineage. They first entered the Theravadan paths, and now they changed to the Mahayana paths. So having changed from the small level of the Theravadan path of accumulation and are now in the Mahayana path of accumulation, they will train in the same way as we heard earlier, as for the practitioner of definite bodhisattva lineage.
Dina she ranje lamla ya lobchon she ranje trachum bitu top sa she nyendue da ranje ge trachum bi ko top sa ne dene ane jamni ji komche tyaba chi be lam ja ju semge te semge ya chi ngore di te chon solam ba cha ji ngore ndi karasan trachum ba cha de te chin solam ba de ine trachum ba de ro karasan nyendue trachum bitu top sa che ane te chin lam nyamlen che te chin solam ge le ge wa de rāngyā rāchū mi tīpū tōp tsārā chē, anī chāchū sēm ñamlā chē tēchīn sōlam kīlā kī tīkā tīkē, tēnī kī tēchīn sōlam bā tīkē rāchū mbā rē tī, nyō mō bā chāsāng bāng tsārā, khunzu tōng bā nī lā mī bī shī lā sōng tē chāsāng tōp tsārā rē tā. Khunzu kī tēchīn sōlam bā tīkē, tōng bā nī lā mī bī shī lā sōng tē tōp tsārā yō rā tē, yī nē tā tēchīn jōlam tōp yō mā rā, tū gō mā rā, kā rā chā tē tōp yā lā yā, jām nī chē tāng, jāngshū sēm tāng, 디나의 파진주기 진비 냠랜다 디수쿠티게 냠랜디 숙치 뭐 장고 걸 쇠남이 소디 숙치에 싸고 거래.
Then there's another type of practitioner. That is one who achieved the Theravadan path of accumulation and continued their training to achieving the level of a foe destroyer or an arhat. So they have achieved liberation from samsara, they've achieved their own individual liberation from samsara. Eventually though, when they give rise to the wish to become a bodhisattva and a Buddha for the sake of all beings, they then need to strive to cultivate love and compassion and bodhicitta. And when this foe destroyer, this arhat, generates bodhicitta, they will then enter the Mahayana paths. And they will now newly enter the Mahayana paths, although they have progressed to completion through the Theravadan paths and achieved the state of arhatship, in other words, complete liberation from psychic existence. Now, because they've generated bodhicitta newly, they enter into the Mahayana paths. And where does this being enter the Mahayana paths? At the path of accumulation. They enter into the Mahayana path of accumulation. And they're entering here in the Mahayana path of accumulation with newly generated bodhicitta in their continuum, as well as already having achieved the union of calm abiding and meditative insight on emptiness, and have developed that realization to the point of having completely eradicated the afflictions together with their seeds. So this person has not only developed the union of calm abiding and meditative insight, realizing emptiness, but they have progressed through their trainings and have eliminated the afflictions together with their seeds. But because bodhicitta is newly generated, they have now only entered the Mahayana path of accumulation. And here, their focus is a little different. Their focus in their training is on the strengthening of their bodhicitta and engaging in the practices of the 6 perfections. Their primary focus is on the accumulation of merit. They will need to make great efforts in the accumulation of merit and the strengthening of their bodhicitta. So the practitioner who had already achieved the individual liberation, they have a different training once they have generated bodhicitta and entered into the Mahayana path of accumulation.
And the negida Jachuma top second Jashima Solamba Tiki and Shila Sundre Gumgu or Vesno Gumgore in a Shila Sundre Tombani maybe Shila Sundre Tobi Chidu, so watching the Gumgo, Maracos Tombani Shila Sundre top Sarva, in a Tombani Shila Sundre Gumgo, Temba Shila Mibigi, and Tambani Shidu Gumgo, Vesum Gumgores, in a Guanyamnejo, so did Jashu Semda, Jimbi. Jimbado Churmla Sobati Sunyam, Sunam Yutswadi, Zos Sawa, as no Tombani Mishila Sundri called Top Sarva, in a Tombani Mishila Sundri Gumgur, Magum Gumgur, in a Tokor Saw, Jolam Tobiala, Garret, checking Garret Sayo Marilana, Sunam Yutswadi, Data Nuba Zoyo Mare, just as Sunam Yutswadi Nuba Zosona, called Tombani Mishila Sundri, Tobio, and Dile, Shila Sundri Tobi Chirdu, and Gumgu Marwa. That is she on the Niela. Tijinema Digina, Janjusemba Digi, Tombani let me be Shila Sundre Matoba Inza, Tombani let me be Shila Sundre to be Chirdu, and a Zokum Horva, Dini Cabrati Yarda. Tijinela Janjusem Semba Digi, Tambone, Janjus Capachi Belam Lobsang Dorje, Dini Yandu Solam, Najolam, Yandu Solam, then Raja Solam, some Munducine, Janjusem Yamlin Chain Della, Tombani let me be Shila Sundre to Yomarva. Matoba and teaching solemn in Yaksu, Tombani let me be Shila Sundre to be Chirdu, and the Yamlin Zorch in the Kumbo. Jajamba Digi, Tombani let me be Shila Sundre top Saware, Jinzada, to be Chirdu, Zo Gumgoma, in there, Koyagi Joy Chidu, Gum Gumgore. The Koy got Zo Karakumos and Sonam Yutso, Soy Society Zorch, Nangore.
Then if one asks the question, this being who achieved the state of liberation, or individual liberation, and now has newly entered into the Mahayana path of accumulation, will they still meditate on emptiness of the union of karma, body, and meditative insight? Or do they not need to bother, considering that they have already abandoned the afflictions together with their seeds? So the answer is yes. They will definitely still meditate on emptiness with the union of karma, abiding, and meditative insight, despite having attained liberation from samsara. However, this is not their primary focus, it's not their primary meditation. They primarily will strengthen bodhicitta, their newly acquired or generated bodhicitta. So they'll primarily focus on generating bodhicitta and the perfections of generosity, ethical restraint, and patience. And this is because their focus is on the accumulation of merit. So of the 2 accumulations of merit and wisdom, they primarily need to focus on the accumulation of merit, and they do this through meditating primarily on strengthening their bodhicitta and the perfections of generosity, ethical restraint, and patience. But nevertheless, on the side, they will still meditate on emptiness. So this is how a practitioner who first progressed through all the Theravadan paths, achieving the goal of individual liberation, and became an arat, or in English, a foe destroyer, and thereby had completely abandoned their afflictions together with their seeds. When they enter the Mahayana paths, this is how they will train. Someone of definite bodhisattva lineage, who, when they first achieve a path, it is the path of the Mahayana path of accumulation, they will focus primarily on the 4 close placements of mindfulness in order to come to realize emptiness with a union of calm abiding and meditative insight so that they can progress from the path of accumulation into the path of preparation. And this is how also a practitioner of indefinite lineage, who first entered into the Theravada paths, but then having achieved just the small level of the Theravada path of accumulation, having met a Mahayana teacher and had given rise to the aspiration to become a bodhisattva, when they then enter the bodhisattva paths, they too will focus primarily on cultivating the union of calm abiding and meditative insight on emptiness in order to progress through the path of accumulation and achieve the path of preparation. So that then is the summary of how these different kinds of practitioners will train on the path of accumulation.
rikchik tenis yung gore te chige tapa chimbi chue nyamlen che gi dyoba shuchen bu yoba che an dela ya an chige nyantue da rangi gi lam tyen ken lama ro chige sudan chebi ne ya an chig nyantue gi lam da rangi lam shebe ne dela ya yuwa gyune ta ma to che ko tapa chimbi chue ra chi nyamlen chigin simbi gi denegi temangi Taba member lam denken, Tam Nyanduda Rangi lam denken, Lama Ganis pet te someway digi Gurmatubaje, called Taba Chimbarang, Lam Yamnaje to Hanji Yongore, Della Duba Yuganji, then Rik Denisingore. Deni Gaza Jella, and the Taba Nyanduda Rangi lam denken Gaza Ganis, Kava Ganis pep cheva in there, digi, and they called Lam Nyanduda Rangi lam lepa, Titugo Mara, Coron, Rik Corantini. Digi. Jigdi, no going lam yamle to Nambone Jam Nije, and Nije, Yamle Jetin, Janshusim Yamle to Gore, Janshusim Gulaki Hor. Denigi Gansa della Tabat Yamle Jekingi, Tajanshusim Badella, Tachim, Tabachim, Ringeba, Ringeba, Ko Tabachim, Lamlan, Lobjon Jaki, Nebares, Ko Guatumaris, Nebares, then Kebares, Urwa. Tis that Denigi, Janshusim Solama della, Janshusim Solama, Ringeba, la Gore. The many young Tamangi, as the Lam Yam Majibi Negablia, Taba Chimpi Givishin, she than Tevaina, Uncle Taba Chimpi Church to Hanchik. That Taba Chimpi Givishin Matabaje, then Yanduda Rangi Lam Dingengi, Givishin Tevaina, and Deladina, Yantu Lam the Rangilam Lobjon Shetukan, Denigi Rik Henchikansa Shorwa. Denigi Rik Gansa de, and the Taba Chimpi. Givishin na cheje and tabachim chue denja kolia on those gene go drosa di ko denke yo mar de ina del dangbo tabachim givishin den tabachim chue so and di nyamlen jeje janjusem nyamlen jene janjusem gyuleki to cholam ba jerwa denege janjusem cholam ba del rik mange ba la go rik mange ba kaso ko nyama lam nyamlen jibi kabla tabachim bi lam nyala je tar ju de nge ba mare ko lamru gyu jene and tama Nielia and Yanduda Rangi Lam Dingi Tabaina, Lama Tabano, Yandu Rangi Lam Yamasa Yaman Jerugore. Denigi Matavaji, Tabachimbi Givishin Tabainza, Dele Denigo Tabachim Tabachimbi, Changisum Solamba Chaderua, Denigi Changisum Solamba de la Yandu Gasore Solamba, Rimangeba Allegor, Rimangeba Asigur. Na Richig many Lam Yamlima JB Kablia. Tabachimbe Givishin Sudan Tabena, Guinea came a lamb Yamlin Machi, Coron, Taman Rangi Yamlin Jagi, Chick Samlo Duba Shuchamo Yangurua, Deniki. Deniki Gaza Gelata, Tabachimbe Kabakandachine, Chushena, and the Tabachimbe Chu Yamlin J2 to go Macora, Deneza. Deneza Delian, Yandugi Lam, Denkan Givishin Chene, Tabana, digging Yandu Lam Tenudu, Dene Yamlin to Yanduga Lam Lobjon Jeje. Nyandu Tachum to Mato Pado, Yandulam Lotion to Gore. Dinaja Rangi gave Shin Tibaina, Delia, and the Rangi Che Danger, then Yamnaja Ranja Tachum to Mato Pibado, Koranja Tachum Yamnachigore. Jazanda Konzo, the Nigi Yamnajin did Gansa della, Taman Ringeba, Taman Ringeba Lagore, Taman Ringeba, Taman Ringeba. Deji Gimadi teaching a ring about my teme ring about my ring mangebas. Then Denegi Yandugi Dachimbi table top ranja Dachimbi table top survey jela and go and Jige Tabachimbi Kivishin Chage and then the Tabachimbi Chutenje. Then it Jamnijum Yamneje, Janjusem Yanaje, then the Janjusem Bacharu Gorwa. Dela and did Janjusemba dela and Nyandueta Ranja Dachimbi Tobon. Mondo sono da Janjusemba Charwa. Idea Janjusemba. Jisa Janjusemba della Rig Midawa Sum Chagurwa. Dambo in the ring be Janjusemba Solamba Jikje, Rig Mange be Janjusemba Solamba Jikje, and the Nyandu money Nyandu Ranja Lamgi Topa Mondo sono Vigida, Gasore, Tomba on the Tajimbe Topa on the Suvigi, and Gasore Janjusemba Solamba. Lam temen ye lamu topo ngondo songa de la rigni yugore solam zam ngondo sonje solam zam nyamlen jeje an raje lamla je janjusem lam ngondo je jikje de so rig mangai ba che go mangai ba de kase temen ye kiwi sin che je temen chue de an go nyamlen je solam ro je da di je le teba chimbi che kiwi sin je de din teba chimbi che le ba nyam chu go rig mangai ba cha de ro je rig ma je san janjusem ba rig mange badela janjusem solam rig mange badela nyanduge da teaching ranjelam ga ma je ba je teaching solam thoba ji yongure nyanduge solam dang ranje solam zam thopje ani janjusem solam ba tho yong de niga janjusem solam ba rig mange badela da mani nyanduge da jumbe to ba undo songje ani nyanduge da ranje da jumbe to ba undo songje da jumba chasa deni thaba jumbe solam ba cha ji deni jisan deni za teaching solam badela rig miro sumyongore jiza dambo in the ring be teaching solam ba sa jikje dambo in the ring mange be teaching solam ba sa jikje and judging be toba undu so be tema nyane da ranje judging be toba undu so be jinsi ba solam ba sa ji desan ba so na sumyongore.
That then is three different types of bodhisattvas on the bodhisattva path of accumulation. So where could we possibly fit in with this? Well, we can understand this in understanding how these three beings who eventually came to the bodhisattva path of accumulation, how they would have been as practitioners before they had achieved any path of accumulation. And we will find ourselves in one of these three places. So firstly, the first illustration was a practitioner who's of definite Mahayana lineage. It's a practitioner who's of definite Mahayana lineage. So they have a strong aspiration for the Mahayana Dharma. They have a strong aspiration to generate the Mahayana Dharma within them, to be counted amongst the children of the Buddhas and become a bodhisattva, striving for the sake of all beings for enlightenment. So such a practitioner then, even should they meet wonderful, skilled practitioners and teachers of the Theravada tradition, they may take inspiration from their teachings, but will not be drawn to the Theravada paths. And this is because they are a practitioner who is definite of Mahayana lineage, or the Mahayana lineage is definite within them. So they will definitely go on to achieve the Mahayana path of accumulation, progressing towards enlightenment. So that was the first type of practitioner. The second type of practitioner was a practitioner who is of a definite Theravada lineage. So the first type was of definite Mahayana lineage, the second type is of definite Theravada lineage. So that was the third type. I got the order wrong. So let's do the second type first. The second type is a practitioner who's of indefinite lineage, So they are indefinite of the Theravada or the Mahayana lineage. So this means they have a strong interest in the Dharma, and should they follow a teacher of the Mahayana, they will strive to enter the paths of the Mahayana. Or should they meet a Theravada teacher, they will strive to enter the paths of the Theravada Dharma. And this is because their lineage is indefinite. They have a strong yearning to cultivate the minds of the Buddha Dharma within them, but they are not definite in either direction. So should they, under the care and guidance of a Mahayana teacher, achieve the Mahayana paths, they may well, at one point, choose to follow a Theravada teacher and change from the Mahayana paths and enter the Theravada paths, because their lineage is indefinite. Similarly, a practitioner of indefinite lineage who's under the care and the guidance of a Theravada teacher, they will strive for and eventually achieve the Theravada path of accumulation, and then should at some point they come under the care and the guidance of a Mahayana teacher, they will then choose to strive to enter the paths of the Mahayana and then achieve the Mahayana paths, a Mahayana path of accumulation. So such a practitioner is of indefinite lineage. They are indefinite before they enter into either of the paths of accumulation, and remain of indefinite lineage even when they have achieved a path of accumulation, and therefore can change their lineage even though they have achieved a path. The third type of practitioner then is of definite Theravada lineage. So whether they meet a Mahayana teacher or not, they are strongly drawn to the Theravada paths, and they will be striving for the Theravada path of accumulation. And before they achieve the Theravada path of accumulation, should they meet a Mahayana teacher, they will take inspiration in their teachings, but their lineage, their inclination is clearly for the Theravada paths. And when the Theravada paths, the Theravada path of accumulation has been achieved in their continuum, even should they then meet a Mahayana teacher, they will take inspiration from their teachings, but they will remain on the Theravada path, striving for individual liberation, and will eventually achieve it. So that then is the third type of practitioner. They then will eventually need to enter into the Mahayana path of accumulation, and they will strive primarily in strengthening their bodhicitta and the accumulation of merit, because they already have great skill in the accumulation of wisdom through already having abandoned completely the afflictions together with their seeds, because they are an arhat, a foe destroyer. So these then are the three different types of lineage. The first being of definite Mahayana lineage, the second being of indefinite lineage, indefinite towards the Theravada or the Mahayana, and thirdly, being of definite Theravada lineage.
That Senpa Solamba de la Riksum Yungore, Jesada, Yende, Rangia Dajumbi, top Sarche, Denigi, Senpa Solamba, the Dajumba Radio, in the Senpa Solambare, Senpa Nane Sosoki already in a Cotrajumba Chadir, Yomo Pachasa Patsade. Shandani body, Tambo in the ring about the ringa, Mangebe, Senpa Solamba body, Senpa Solamba Sosoki Bure, Sosoki Bure, Dajumba Mare, Yomo Papa Mare. And Mababa is a dingy body that Conso Sanji Govan Toyo, Sunyel Togure land, Sunyel Togure lamna, Nanganzo some Tabanam, Judging by the Niel Toyas, your workers in the Corniomo Bachaza Bansarenza, judging by the Niel Togure some Grova. In a Togoma, Sunyel Togure Sine, Dabo in the ring bada, ring Mambachans, Solambati, judging Sanji Govan Niel Togures. Then Yandu Range judgment Tobon songs, top charge, engines and Solambati, Sanjago Toya, Manga Gores, Ununga Gores. Now when you ring a bit changes about Solambada, Rimanga bitches Solambani Bodigi, Sanjago Toya, Tanya, or Tanya, Yacht Gores. Judging but Tobon songs changes about Solambati, Sanjago Toya, Taringa, yours, your mouth, just Manga Gores or that.
So on the Mahayana path of accumulation, all three of these types of beings will be found. Those who are definite Mahayana lineage, who always set out with clear determination to generate the parts of the Mahayana in their continuum, and now that they have, are definite to continue to Buddhahood. There are those of indefinite lineage, who have entered into the Mahayana path of accumulation, but may well change to the Thevadan path of accumulation. And there are those of definite Thevadan lineage who have completed the Thevadan paths, attained the state of an Arhat, and have now newly entered into the paths of the Bodhisattvas, but the Bodhisattva path of accumulation. So amongst these three types of beings that are found on the path of accumulation, which will achieve enlightenment first? So one may well assume that it's the being of definite Thevadan lineage who first achieved the state of a Phodhisthara, of an Arhat, and now has newly entered into the Mahayana path of accumulation. Because this is a practitioner who has completely eradicated the afflictions together with their seeds, and thereby has great familiarity with meditating on emptiness, and they have not only the union of calm abiding and meditative insight realizing emptiness, but they have a direct realization of emptiness, and that direct realization developed to the point where actual liberation was achieved, where all the afflictions and all the seeds were eliminated. But actually, they do not achieve enlightenment most quickly. Of these three types of practitioner, the one that does achieve enlightenment quickest is the one of definite Mahayana lineage. So when they achieve the Mahayana path of accumulation, they don't have a direct realization of emptiness. They don't even have the inferential realization of emptiness based on a union of calm abiding and meditative insight, because that is the mark of entering into the path of preparation. They're on the path of accumulation. So they just have a realization of emptiness, which they are trying to hold with calm abiding, and thereafter will be trying to hold with meditative insight. So despite right now, they are not so developed, they will be the ones who progress through the five paths most quickly.
Many korong many nyandue da rangye dachum bi tv top kapla an ko nyomo ba chasan pangcha ne shiwi an nyomo ba chasan shiwi gi shiwa dewa de top je an dongba ni ya ma dewi den le dong nyamba sha ne gyunigu nyamba sha go ro ba ne nyamba sha go ro ba chasan di nyamba nyandue da rangye dachum bi de ni gi gyunigu nyamba sha ba gi gomshi shu chen bo re nyamje ja ne gomshi shu chen bo re chasan janju simbe cholam ba to yo and diga so the nyamba shaibigi komchigi topki jinsime cholan tosana denele nyamba shaje be nyamba shaje yuni wushu shaje go re je nyamba shago re je yanse deni nyamba shago res je nyamba shabanza ko nyamba mango shade de sonami cho saye de du de nyul chago wa gola je deni inza ni dusi sanyo go ba tobala dusi ma go be gimsen dire da gasen ko nyama meni nyandue da rangye jachu be ne gaso be shiwi dewa topje shiwi dingi jinle ya ni shiwo nyamba shabe go gomshil ma sana gomba shuk chimbo yo res yo banza jenisime cholama chama ineya gadrelia de nyamba shaje ani gyunbu go go res 지산 되니 균류부 고고래 되는 양바샤지 균류부 고요도 아니 바라들 선음이 소사야디 아니 뒤뒤뒤 뉴를 차로 와 지산 산교고바 토발라 선음이 소대야 슈침보 지고 싸고 원자 디사마도디 아니 산교고바 토발라 다른 차야데 되고 그래서는 선음이 소사야라 그 뒤수 통을 차르고 그래서 시위 띵이들 양바샤는 균류부 바르도 양바샤로 그고 녀마기 양바시고 곰시기 원기 지난 디네자 하고 그 산조고 토야려 다 링아지 교마 고그레서 김전디리 에 당보인의 링에 바당 안에 리 망에 베전시면 솔람바디 녀mom바 빵비 빵바 시위기 대화데 마토바자 델레냐모 곰비 곰시메로 그 그런 거두 델량 소사선미 소사야 되게 사야다 되네 동반이 고미야다 딩이들이 뭐 뒤에 따따따따 치는 거냐면 이제 그거를 이제 그 가서래 산요고 와서 다 얘기를 해서 디차고와 고규 무튼 두고로와 지부디 아니 동반이래 가서 냠바샤지 유니 냠바샤도 되는 손님이 소사야디 뒤시마 고고로와 디 전에 아니 가서래 산요고 와서 다 링그리스 조가 망하 고그래서 김전로 되죠. 곰 잡지 균 하고 라고 그러셔. 라신고 소세네 다 가지래 고송고수 곰 제거로 받네. 그 곰변에 남준 곰시 변에 셰 땅에 제모 셰장 탑집에 곰시우 전부 여번에 뒤에 되는 매나 가브릴레 디 곰시 괜찮은 셰 다 여러 받으시나 여러 뒤로 제거로 봐.
So of the three types of practitioner, it's that of definite Mahayana lineage who will achieve enlightenment first, followed by that of indefinite lineage, and way behind both of them, will be the practitioner of definite Theravada lineage. And the reason for this is the practitioner of definite Theravada lineage has a strong yearning for their individual liberation and thereby made great effort to develop definite emergence and develop the wisdom realizing emptiness and sever the root of cyclic existence, the ignorance of self-grasping, in order to achieve their own peace of liberation. And when this long yearned for goal was achieved and they entered into the peace of liberation, they abided in this long yearned for meditative equipoise of liberation for an extensive period of time, enjoying the bliss, the peace of this meditative equipoise. And abiding in this meditative equipoise for such an extensive period of time, they thereby developed a strong familiarity, a strong habituation to this peaceful, blissful meditative equipoise. When eventually the wish arises in them to become a bodhisattva, to generate love and compassion and eventually bodhicitta, and enter into the bodhisattva paths, impeding this generation as well as impeding the strengthening of their bodhicitta and the accumulation of merit over the progression of the bodhisattva paths, what will impede their progression is this strong habituation, the strong familiarity to the meditative equipoise of liberation, to this great peace and bliss of that meditative equipoise. So this means, whilst they are striving for Buddhahood, whilst they are striving for the accumulation of merit which they so desperately need in order to become a Buddha, they will, because of this familiarity, will be strongly drawn to re-enter the blissful state of meditative equipoise. And this they will do just like someone, for example, who loves singing and has a strong habituation to singing and takes great pleasure in it. They will mentally sing or break out into song regularly because they have a strong familiarity with this and take great pleasure in it. Similarly, with this Arat, who has now entered into the bodhisattva paths, their habituation will draw them to the bliss of peace, the bliss of the meditative equipoise of liberation. And this will consume a lot of time and therefore slow down, impede their accumulation of merit which they require to progress through the bodhisattva paths. And it's for this reason, of the three practitioners, the one of definite Hinayana lineage or definite Theravada lineage who achieved liberation, they will progress most slowly to enlightenment.
lam nyamlen jebaina ane chaba chimbyuki lam nyamlen jebaina so sanyo go thobala ta nigiri si gorta kanjele jisa dene jebaina dangba nga jugi tanga jo rig mangai baro chabaina tanga jugi 직 dangba lam nyamlen jebaina jamni je da jaju sem 대 잡아치면 줄 때려야 냠내 지샤바이나 다 상여고 벌라 다 예체고로 와서거든.
Therefore, for practitioners such as ourselves, we should ensure we make effort in continuously generating the wish for Buddhahood for the sake of others, training in love, compassion, and bodhicitta to ensure that we strengthen the aspiration for Buddhahood and don't be drawn away.
Dini inza da ngara zuge dini ge janyu sima riksum yube nane da de dang ngosu sheye ki lam nyamle shila sunri kaso jamba nyasha ko ngosu sheye di da ngara zuge jizu jamba kumbe ge ngondo kyense da dina sunshi dina ni ngara zu dina sheye ngosu sunya de gara sosne sheye di dangbo ni ringe be ge janyu sima solamba digi da jamba nyasha ji lam nyamle jetang ko desuge lam nyamle jimba ngosu sheye de ngosu sheye gore dinande da 되는 마 안에 지기 차상 샹다디게 용고래 이제 ngosu 조 ngosu 셰디 다 당보인 링이 베쳐주신 바디기 람냠 초람바디 람냠네 지다시고 제가 이제 잠반예샤시 냠네 지다시고 되네 인자 제가 잠반예샤디 델라미 비게 저 초람바디게 잠반예샤디 조 초람 야소 kum고래 그래서는 동반예라 비비시라서 되게 죽고래스 디시도 kum고래스 어디 셰디 다고 당보인 링이 베쳐주신 바디 람냠네 지다 림바디 조 ngosu 시고래시
Those are the three lineages of bodhisattvas and three lineages of bodhisattvas. So this text that we're studying here is based on Asanga's Compendium of Knowledge, which was composed by Arya Asanga together with Maitreya, and it is written explicitly from the perspective, or for the perspective of those of definite Mahayana lineage, But indirectly, it also includes the other two types of practitioners, those of definite Tibetan lineage, who will re-enter, or have now re-entered, or not re-entered, who have now, despite being foe destroyers, have newly attained the Mahayana path of accumulation, as well as those of indefinite lineage, who have perhaps come from the Tibetan path of accumulation and are now in the Mahayana path of accumulation. So it will include those two types of practitioners, but it's explicitly for the perspective of those of definite Mahayana lineage.
Ludan, Soada, Semda, Che Namso Osage, she soon be cheers, the Gundunalia, and the Jamaniac Mipatilla, and this one.
So let's now turn back to the text. So we're on the second page, right in the middle, and here is a quote from Asanga's Compendium of Knowledge, which states, "If it is asked, what are the observed objects of the close placements of mindfulness? They are body, feelings, the mind, and phenomena."
Dada 저기 뭔가 죄 나네 손야디 조 손야디 제라마웨기 아니 데바 조로 숨거래 당고 뭐 군디기 나를 손야디 조디 되데바 단지 수기 내가서래 공부 조로 숨거래 되데바 진짜.
So there are two primary Abhidharma texts. So the one that's being referred to right here, the Compendium of Knowledge by Asanga, is composed in terms of the four close placements of mindfulness. They are composed from the perspective of the Sautrantika. And over the page you'll see for the first time reference to Vasubandhu's Treasury of Knowledge, which is also an Abhidharma text, and that is written from the perspective of the Vaibhashika. So Vasubandhu writes from the perspective of the Vaibhashika, and Asanga writes from the perspective of the Sautrantika. The explanation in our text, though, follows most closely that of Asanga's Compendium of Knowledge.
당한 저기 다들 잠반야샤 세야들이야 시샤 류 잠반야샤 셈 잠반야샤 안에 가서 소화 잠반야 취 잠반야샤 안에 취 잠반야샤 세디 시고로 와디나니마 나 제라마와 코로나 저기 제라마에게 송나라 집에나 라신 잠반야샤 세다 안에 저 제와 잠반야샤 세 미버 잠반야샤 세디 안에 잠반야샤 데 디니 숨리 여와시 시고래 류대 가서 라신 잠반야샤 제와 잠반야샤 미버 잠반야샤
Last time then we covered the 4 observed objects of the close placements of mindfulness, with the first being the body, then feelings, thirdly the mind, and fourthly phenomena. So 4 observed objects. The Vaibhashika, though, they present 3. And the 3 are the maybe you can translate it as the natural observed, the natural object, the connected object, and then thirdly, the observed object. So it'll be close placement on the natural close placement, maybe, or the close placement on nature, perhaps, the close placement on connection, close placement on the observed object.
yu de la jambi ge yu de la mi je jambi ge pa zhe ji du jambi sim bi nga ne sherab ge jaba che bi ge sherab de la ne jamba nya ja la ge es de ai jamba nya sha de la sherab yin gu re se go re ya da nga zong bo kun du ge so na che ba ne jamba nya ja de la ane sherab yin go ya mar de jamba da sherab ane sha mo yo re se jamba da sherab mi da sun da ni ju we ane so wa So we
see that there's a difference in the objects, but there's also a difference in terms of the apprehending consciousness, the particular consciousness that apprehends those objects. So in the case of the presentation or the understanding of the Vaibhashika, it is wisdom alone that apprehends those 3 objects. But from a Sangha's perspective, it's a union of wisdom and mindfulness that apprehends the 4 observed objects.
Di xiao gu bi gyumzen ga re la wa da di xiao gu bi gyumzen ga re lam na da di gyumzen de xi wa re xi ba chi mi ba chi bi gyumzen yue de sa.
The text then will continue with presenting why these 4 objects are the 4 objects of close placement of mindfulness.
Da mi ba de xiao gu bi gyumzen ga re lam na de gyumzen de xi wa da ji ba nam gi lu la da gi tian da cho wa la da gi long chu gi xi sem la da gyu ngo po che la da cha so nyom gu ne nyom mo ba da de so nam ja do ngom bar she ba bang bi che yi mi che se de.
Now text continues. The reasons for positing these 4 as the observed objects are so that the immature will abandon overt clinging to 1. The body as being the abode of the self, 2. Feelings as being the basis for the self's experience. 3. The mind as the impermanent phenomenon that is the self. And 4. Phenomena as the self of the thoroughly afflicted class, such as attachment, and the completely pure class, such as faith.
Jiba namgi lula dagi tien seoda. Jiba sena soso gewo sigura soso gewo dinane da nga juge lamne ya lobjong ma chegen da soso gewo nane da nga zuru ora sigore jiba sede. Deso ge garasi ora sene lula dagi tien lula ya dus dagi lula dagi tien es. Sede dagi tien de la da khala ora sene 저게 소소기보디게 가르친 거라서 나 류들을 미쳐 다 나 가르치기 위해서 내가 저기 류디 낭네 아니 가서 다디 라신 주바 나디 나도 그러와 진짜 류디 다 임바로 책고 다 저기 소소기보 가르 류디 아주 다디 류를 때려서 진짜 류를 땡제 아니 소소기 그게 간실량아 저기 내가 가래 제베네 류를 땡데 저 파주 조반데 류를 땡데 저거를 되바네 기시시나 류를 땡데 저 진짜 류를 나 저기 류를 땡데 다기 그 자와 가르쳐 류를 땡고 그래서 다디 류를 땡 바래서 그래서 다 소소기 보기 로를 차도 갑리네 아 저기 가르쳐서 류이 통하지 미디디도 사다 류를 파차지 류이 파차지 아 저기 지난 류다 다니도 오지 바래 이내 류다 다니는 거 가가러 와 이내 알아서라 소소기 뭐 집어디기 직바로 실로래야 현지 증도 거래 증거로 와다 로래야 직바로 삼다도 거래 되네 인자 다디 류기 띵에 사셔고 그래서 다 류라 다디 류기 띵 류를 띵 거래서 류디 다기 띵에서 미파바바바 다데데 집에 마토가 샤는 되게 마토 괜찮은 되게 집에서 막 소소기고 파발라위도 되는 소람 냠는 제 소소기고 개발하라 차고래 소소기 개발전 차고래 그래서 네
We see here that there's reference made to the immature. So who do the immature, or often translated as the childish, who does this refer to? So this refers to ordinary beings such as ourselves who are yet to attain a path in our continuum. So those who are ordinary such as ourselves, when we think of the self, we naturally think of the body. I go here, I sit here, he comes from there, she goes over there. Well, we confuse the sense of self-identity with the physical body. So if we think of someone, we think of ourselves, or we think of someone, then naturally to our mind, their body appears. And whilst the body and the self are of one entity, they are different. But we confuse this, thinking that they are the same. Our sense of self-identity is so entwined with the body that we confuse this, thinking that they are one and the same. Hence, the first close placement of mindfulness is on the body for the aid of the immature.
안에 다기 땡에서 다기 땡치고 세상 안 저기 되버 되기게 안에 류래 되네 안에 차바데 되비 되샤되게 되 류래 되네 안에 차바기 그래서 류래 되바데 차바기 그래서 그러와
We have the strong tendency to consider the body as the basis and foundation of our inherent personal identity, and then independence on this body, feelings arise.
나데네 안에 데네 인자다 류래 되네 안데 류디
So yeah, the last bit I didn't say right, so I'll just repeat it. We have the strong tendency to consider the body as the basis and foundation for our own inherent identity, and therefore attachment and afflictions arise in dependence on this body.
세상에 류디 안에 다기 땡인자 안에 류디 안에 류 잠반예샤 가서 잠반예시 미발에 류치 샤고 비 김자로 되네자 류디 잠반예시 미바 샤바레시 그러와
So because we confuse our sense of self-identity with the body, and we see the body as the abode of the self, these two are entwined, it is the first observed object for the close placement of mindfulness.
내내 초화해야 돼. 내내 초화를 샤바래. 지난 초화대시 가르샤바래스는 잠반이 미바샤고 김제 가래라네 가르진의 샤바래스는 김제들라 초화 다기 론주기 시임이 시다스. 지난 초화해야 돼. 다기 론주기 시리에스. 시인자는 다 잠반이 미바샤바래스래.
Then the second observed object is that of feeling, and our text states feelings as being the basis for the self's experience.
Dada chowa de dagi lonju ge shiri la de nganzu jiban namgi ane chowa kaso lonju ge shidi kaso dagi nganzu ge lonju ge shidi chowa res karasene bene nyawa baro shita dene ina ane machi chowa dunga lonju go dunga nyungu ro chiza nyoya de ga chowa kare nyungu se nganzu ge chowa de nyungu ro da lonju ge shisi de kare chine nyungu ro kare nyungu ro sin chowa de nyungu ro chiza 초와 dunga nyoyada. Ani miral harubo chi inane nga zik debel harubo chi inane ani chowa ki chi mida, deba dang, debe mila soba la dang, ani samden dangbo dang, niba la soba, sumba la soba, ani chine kari nyungu rasi, chowa dewa dang, ani zogoro nyungu rasi, chisa chowi dewa li longchu go rasi. Da dene ki sume ba da samden shibi ki lhadi ki chowa tangyum lo longchu go rasi. Chisa da longchu 수 something 시바다 수 메바 세야디게 초와 땅님로 롱주고 그랬어. 롱주 시데 초와 땅님마도 컨설 초와 대와요 말 dun가요 말 와다 녀야디 가선 초와 땅님마도 요 말. 저 초와 땅님 롱주고 그랬어. 당 아주 대바로 시나 근데 초와 대와요 용구를 갑리 초와 dun가 용구를 대비 되니게 하다 밀래 초와 대와 dun가 니가 롱주고 그러. 다 녀와 바다 이다 발라진네 마체다 초와 dun가 용구 그러. 진짜 롱주 시데 용가리 용구 알았으니 초와의 용구 알았지. 진짜 초와의 용구여 봐서 초와의 롱주 가지고 용 롱주에서도 용할 때 쓰대. 진짜 다 초와의 롱주기 시리즈. 진짜 롱주기 시리 초와의 레레. 되네 인자 초와의 아니 때문에 미발 샤바레스.
The reason why then the second observed object for the immature to abandon is that of feelings, is because the three types of feelings, that of pleasure, of pain, and neutral feelings, these that beings experience, since we consider them to be the objects of experience of this personal identity. So the being suffering in the painful realms of the lower realms, they primarily experience the suffering feelings. In fact, almost every feeling they do experience, especially in the hells, is the feeling of suffering. For us as humans, as well as the gods, the desire, form, and formless realms, then as humans certainly, we experience a mix of feelings, sometimes pleasant, often suffering feelings. And gods experience a predominance of pleasurable feelings. And then for those in the fourth concentration, then they experience only neutral feelings. So here we can see that amongst the class of samsaric beings, there are some who have a predominance for one of the three types of feelings, others have more of a mix. But this is an object of abandonment because these different types of feelings, we confuse this experience with that of the personal identity.
다 셈디 때문에 재미봐 샤고 가르스네 셈라 다기 오보다 시디 다 셈라 다기 오보 시디 당아 저기 집안님 소소기원에 셈될이야 삼다시아 저 나세데 다세데 제디 안 셈될 진거래지 셈데 다기 오보 시디다 아 저기 셈리아 다도 주바 준비 시치고래스 인자 셈디 샤바레 셈디 때문에 미바 샤바레지.
And the third object for the immature to abandon is the mind, which is the impermanent phenomena that is seen as to be the self.
다레샤 세기 제바친의 제단 이기 넘버 쉐발 다 증거와 진짜 다 셈이 얘는 셈 잡아로신 군신 넘버 쉐바들 셈디 다도 좀 증거래 다레샤 디니기 인자다 가질 다 샤디 류 가소레 셈디 다 진비게 시 다도 다비 시 인자 시 인반 인자 네 셈디 아니 담바 미발 샤바레샤지.
The reason then the mind as impermanent, it states here, the mind as impermanent phenomenon that is the self, is because as ordinary beings, when we search for the self. We try and find the self. Then when we think we found it, when we settle on this personal identity, the sense of self, it's usually the mind that we identify as being the self. And amongst the varying divisions of mind here, remember it specifically refers to our mental consciousness or the primary consciousness or the main mind. This is what we tend to settle on as being the illustration of the self. When we feel we've found our sense of self-identity that travels from life to life, we assume it is this, our mental consciousness.
That chela chaso kaso chela da chaso kunyo nyomo batang deso namjang do ngombar simba pangbe chiri sede da chela sede che sede da dinale rik mangbo yoba sa dinalia ane da do juba simbe dala chabe chaba da an sha kon dinegi kiegi nyomo be rikchik di pang chare se ko meba su yare sa da deri docho debala sobage ane deso kiwi chiti nyamso laya rese dinegi kebar cheche nyamsolaya da pangja dorja tang ane nyamsolaya ki di xie go ba yinza andi chane ane gaso che di ane gaso jambanye shi mi ba sha ba re che.
Then the fourth observed object is that of phenomena. And our text states, phenomena as the self or the thoroughly afflicted class, such as attachments, and the completely pure class, such as faith. So here, then this refers to a wide variety of phenomena as we saw in the subdivisions above. But we can divide these into two, those of the thoroughly afflicted class, such as self-grasping, attachment, and anger, which are to be abandoned, and those which are the opposite to that, which are to be trained in, those of the completely pure kind. So these are included here amongst the phenomena.
당한 저기 메제라 마와로시네 가르송고라스네 델리아 안에 류샤바디 저기 하 소소기고 지바티기 냠 하고 된가도 류디 안에 베네 류디 라바레스 제산 류디 제가 저기 류디 라바인자 류디 하고 레라인자 안에 라바레스 제산 디 라바디 당보샤바레지레 미바샤바레스 그래서 디네 초와디 류디레 데 차와지 안에 인자 초와디 샤바레스 안디네 셈디 안 초유네 셈 초와디 데 셈진에 초와레라 하고로 빈 동아녀다 대기 초녀다 하고 레라 셈레 하고야 레라와지 안 수글레 류레 하고야 될 데스칼레 카와르와 제자 초와디 니 초와지 디네 셈디다 초와디 데술레 데스칼레 카와자 초와 셈 샤바 디니 딜레자다 최나네다 다음에 봐도 동반이라서 봐도 딜레칼레 카와르 이네 최셔야돼 내가 소리 타마샤 바레시 지산 잠반예샤기 미바텔라 류소 셈 최시시샤디 고당보 류샤디 라바 고 차라디니 그림베친도 샤용 바레시 당가지 랭안줄레 다가레 고 다디고 시베네 당보 잠반예지단 류 당보 샤고 바 김장가레 소와님 샤오 셈 된최 타마샤도 와스베 다 당보 샤도 류디 라바 레라디 라바레 인젠디 하웨 레라완자 당보 되는 소와디 되는 이바든 셈도 수샤바레서는 이김자로 책으로.
So there we briefly mentioned the reasons why these four objects of the body, the feelings, mind, and phenomena are the four observed objects for the close placements of mindfulness. The reason then for them being presented in this specific sequence is the body is something we're so very familiar with, and therefore we'll be able to more easily understand that it is empty of being the abode of the self. And once one has understood well, meditated well on the body and understood that it's empty of being the abode of the self, one can reflect then more easily on the second of the four close placements, that of feelings, the second observed object, which is seen as slightly subtler than the mind, to understand it as being slightly subtler. And similarly, when one has understood that the feelings are empty of being the basis for what the self's experience, then one can move to a subtler object still, the mind, and reflect then on the mind. And when one has become skilled in that, one can move to the subtlest of the four objects, that of phenomena. So that is the reason for this specific sequence.
Jiba namgi lu di dagi tenre sido tanga zuki jiba suzuki wadiki lu la mi che tanga zuki da se tanga zuki da yogo che da da nga zuki di midi du se da tanga nga zuki lu de le tong de lu de le che ne ane du da midu se da deni ki lu la tempi ke chakpa ki da deni yungo res chisna da deni ki debi ki chakpa ki di lu la tempi ke chakpa ki yungo re jirwa deni jeba ina da chakpa kiya gari dundu chakpa la di gari dundu nyergo labna chakpa digi dini sowa dewa la dundu nyer che sowa dewa di nyoye ki dunda la chakpa ki gore chiruwa da chakpa ki gore sowa dewa di nyoye dunda chakpa ki gore chizan dini inzan chizan lu la dagi ten se lu li dagi ten che dela bimbi chakpa ki dini de chakpa deyang 아니 가리 된다를 기고래서는 소와 대화 영역에 된다라 잡아기고 제제 대화도 론조에게 된다라 잡아기고래서 해야지 지산 소와 다기 론조시 잡아기야지 가리 론조 가리 치듯이 대화 론조에게 대화해야 된다 소와 대화 론조에게 된다 소와 대화 차기로 대화 론조에게 된다라 잡아기고래라면도 안 대화도 가래라는 소와 대화 차 소와 차로 그러고 된자 소와 론조에 시세 되는 시도와 류레미 차과기 그러와다 차과기에도 차과디다 가르미기시데 대화 영역에 된다라 차과기 거래라로 와다 차과기 지난 대화대 가래서 소화 대화로 와 지난 되니게잖아 류이데 당보 류다기 텐스 류당보샤 되니 류이데라 되니 차과기에도 차과디기 가르 영역에 치든 소화 대화 론조에게 된다라 소화 대화 영역에 된다라 대화 영역에 된다라 차과기 거래 대화 론조에게 된다라 차과기 거래 그래서 대화 론조에 된다 대화디 가래선 소화 대화 레슨 소화디 이바로시 되니게 본도스치는 용거로 와
This can be understood in a number of ways. So we look at another. So the body is where, for us ordinary beings, we need to investigate for the self, because we tend to associate our body so with the sense of self, ourselves and others. We think of someone, their body appears to our mind. We think of ourselves, our body appears. And independence on our body, afflictions so readily arise, for example, attachment. So dependence on our body, attachment arises. And what is attachment? It's a desiring for happiness. What is happiness? It is a feeling of happiness, a feeling of pleasure. So there's a sequence here. From confusing the body with ourself, attachment arises. And attachment is the longing for pleasure. And this longing for pleasure is the longing for pleasant feelings or happy feelings. So here we can see the sequence between the first and the second observed object of the close placements of mindfulness.
다 초와 대화도 론주에게 되는 차과기에도 개완자 다 되니 디 차과데 간스 용구레 세대다 심주체에도 셈리아 아 집에 셈 다도 주바 쯤에 다진 다도 셈라 비네 다도 주에 다진 내려 되니 다 리고레시아 시고라 진짜 다셈 다고 오보시 셈라 다고 오보시아디 시에디 시고라.
And then one investigates, how does this attachment arise? Comes from the ignorance of self-grasping. And the ignorance of self-grasping is mind. And which is mind. And this then is our link to the third observed object.
nga dato chupa tsimbeke dasin di kange lulemi pe chapake ne chowa nyongorwa chowa la chagorwa dine za dine gi da ane da pa du simjuche du dine gi da nyomomberikti Chöla mi bigi na nyomo barikta mara yon digi chasa sem dadu sube dasile tene yungor chasa nyomo ba digi ta du cheba chedu nyomo ba digi rikti pancha che ta nyomo ba rikti tene ge panya ya lam gar gom che pangure labde du debala sube che de lam nyamlen jirim ba chene pangu ba shi yongor sa tene yeza chöla chö sadi din shiba charu korwa.
Then recognizing here that it's the ignorance of self-grasping from which attachment and all the afflictions arise. The wish will arise to then abandon the ignorance of self-grasping. So we now are linking to the fourth observed object, that of phenomena, because here we have come to recognize that attachment comes from the ignorance of self-grasping. In fact, all the afflictions come from the ignorance of self-grasping. And these are included in the thoroughly afflicted class. And how to abandon them? Through cultivating the opposite, the completely pure class. For example, faith.
jiba lamna jidang pugu la goro, pugu chung la goro, pugu chung diki, jiba la goro, chung diki. Pugu chung jiba la yode, lu gi nubaya, nushu ya chige lang yo mare, sem gi nubaya kagu nesu kagu shingo mara, jiba se de pugu chung diki jiba se goro. Kono jiba diki ya, sem gi nesu da nga jiki yakbo re, di duwa re, andi yene dezu gi nesu kanga jira shingo mare, ane lugi nushu topsuya da kaya yoma dene ki nubara masan luida semnigi na nuba chungchung ma do yoma pugu jiba rwa chizan jiba labyo de da nga zugi soso kibo da tama kyowa digi jiba na resi ura da nga zugi chigi nyomongba ka ane ski yuebe da ane da yue mege kura da dene ki 가고 니수 하고 하고 말해지를 하고 먹어라. 그래서 데니기 누바 부나신 차려. 그래서 람 냠는 지기 림바 삼다베나 부나이래. 부고 집어나이래. 집어래서. 그래서 집어 인자 근데 집어로 부고 춘춘질래 지게 제 사야 직드네 땡고 주분여기 마 먹어람사 직드네 칼바히를 사셔로 와 사기로 와. 그래서 그 누구여배 평규여배 하모고네 누구여배나 코파 칼레게 사기로와 지바디 디나싱아 저기 예수 하모고 한잔 지바디게 나 저기 디니게 류리아 안데 지 다리 SMB게 될이야 미제 달 삼다 달요 롤차야 나레서 롤차야다 안데 디에 돈에 안 될이야 차바기야다 안두스니 용고래 사실 책으로 와대.
We saw here that's term the immature, and we heard then that the immature refers to those who have yet to achieve a path. So why is this term immature used? Or it's often also translated as the childish. Well, the particular term in Tibetan, if it's seen in the sequence of the development of a person, it refers to the age of someone when they are a very young child. So perhaps a toddler or a preschooler, so a very young child. So everyone agrees, are immature or childish. And why are they immature or childish? Because physically they're very weak, and they have very limited control over their bodies. Similarly, mentally, they are very weak in the sense of having very limited control over their minds. And those of you who are parents, as well as those of you who aren't and have observed young children, will know this. They have limited control over their bodies as well as their minds. Then this is related to those of us who have yet to achieve a path, because we too have very limited control over ourselves. So whilst we aren't like a young child who everything they pick up goes straight into their mouths, and those of you at home who have young children, you know you need to always watch them for this. For us, the way that we act just like the immature is that as soon as, under the influence of the ignorance of self-grasping, all these afflictions arise. and we act under their influence. Without any thought, we believe that what appears to our mind exists in exactly the way that it appears. And thereby, we have all these discursive thoughts, we say the things we do, and engage in the physical actions that we do. So we act just like a young immature child sees something, picks it up, puts it in their mind, without any control. And for us, as this ignorance of self-grasping ripens, leading to all the variety of afflictions, which we then act under the influence of. And therefore, us ordinary beings are likened to the immature.
jiba mayingena soso jibo chebawa dameba nyamlenchene bene soso jibo lamlo nyamleche soso jibo dane jime soso jibo ine tiga dameba token gansa dene ki mitaba damebe namsha nyamleche soso jibo yongore andinashin pabe gansa deso 지난 디수기 가르 semgorasene lulia anchik luidi nga 주기 바샤는 nga 세디 luidi 파 따바 잠지마도 luidi nga 말에 선배선마다 안디 제바이나 델이야 차바게나 균디네 용구리 지산디 차바게는 되게 말에 선배선마다야다 델이야 차바마게 녀보선다야디 군주기 신고로와 지산디네 인자 니 냠는 제바 제투어 당아주 지바 소소기보 타마바디 디마투바지 지바스라 다르와 당아주 미체부를 차서도 어디 전에 뇌기에 디자네 디고 말해서 비게 가야다 어디 지고래 디제는 뇌기에서 개발 여와치 신고로와 인디 나신 그 람냠네지게 다안에 퇴섬 곰섬 제겐 람귤에 맞게 바이네 퇴섬 곰섬 제되게 다데니기 바이나 고콤바 예디게나 파바다 파베 가사다 람귤에 예디기네 지산 건조 소소기 보이네 지바 체고 말 건조가스네 야니데 하고 디제나 오데 약고 말디 두둥 맞주 녀모 바디 가서 강아 체기래서다 디제네 디기 죽투그래서 개발 예와디 규디 개발 체신고 이내 당한 저기 도시네 나삼 땅에네 나중에 풍보디 제 나래 섬고 말바디 저 풍보세야디 나세디니 풍보질 파 뢰파 따바지리 마도 근데 그 풍보 호랑 다 말에 선배삼로 요러바다 건조 디인자 건조 지바세야디 디니기 남자 하모관디길 지바세라로바다.
And let's look at the usage of a couple of terms here, one being the immature or the childish, and another ordinary beings. The immature or the childish specifically refers to those who are not skilled in study, reflection, and meditation. And therefore, whatever appears to them, they readily believe and act under the influence of ignorance. They believe that whatever appears to the mind is valid, is correct, and things exist in this way, and they act under the influence of this. These are the childish, the immature, and they are ordinary beings. But there are many other types of ordinary beings who are not immature, who are not childish, but they can still be correctly referred to as ordinary beings, so you may well see ordinary beings referred to in text, but they are not necessarily included amongst the immature. But they are called ordinary when compared to those above them, those who are extraordinary. So an ordinary being can be someone who is skilled in reflecting on emptiness but is yet to achieve a path. Someone who has achieved a path in their continuum can also be called an ordinary being. An Arya being, someone who has realized emptiness directly, can also be called an ordinary being. So, but that Arya being would be on the paths of seeing or meditation only. So therefore, you can have an Arya being on the path of seeing or meditation called an ordinary being, because when they're compared to a Buddha. Or an ordinary bodhisattva, for example, is an ordinary being compared to an Arya being. Or someone who's yet to achieve a path, but is skilled in hearing, reflecting, meditating, but they are considered ordinary compared to those on a path. So those are all ordinary beings, but they're not immature, because depending on their level of realization, they know that what appears to their mind doesn't exist in the way that it appears, and this knowledge has an impact on their behavior, on their train of thought, their speech, and their activity. So depending whether they've yet to realize emptiness or have achieved a path, an ordinary path, or if they've achieved a superior path, an Arya path of seeing or meditation, will determine the strength of what appears to them and the impact it has on them. But they will, all to varying degrees, not be fooled by what appears to them. So these are ordinary beings, but they are not childish beings.
다 최대게 잡아내 재미봐 샤고 비기 김센디게 도 셰셰 당아도 디리쇼게 다 네스디디네 디리셰디 디네와 디네 자당 주게 가르쳐고래 람다 당아 주게 다 제시심비기 링에 바체제 제시심비기 냠네 제바나 산요고 발라 타 녀와 용고서 당아 주게 냠네 제 당번에 다 태와 진비기 잠니제 삼다지 냠네 제다 디나시 다 류다 안도 초와다 당아 주류ля 도수진에 근데 나 집에 남진 냠네 삼다나 딘스탄 거디 당하데 따다 지고 말레스 다디 소소기고 개발했잖아 전주 람냠네 제겐디기 류리아 삼다나 딘스탄 거레서지 어두스진에 나 삼다디로와 다디리 이 셰디가 삼다데 데네야 잠바나 저기 삼라다데 차고래 지사 류라 지바 남지 류들라 다게 류다 다니 챵버라 지바 삼다 류리아 차바게다 지디스 지고 지사 소소기고 챵버잖아 저스말 냠렘지 제겐디기 류라 다데 삼등고 다데 싱고 마르 지사 딜리아 차바게바다 디니 제바나 근데 지규엔데디 용고레 세바기 삼데디 콘주기 킹고르 디나시데 가노주이네 류리아 도시네 차고마게게 삼다야다 근데 지 류시아 고롱 다 말에 제사 류리 나서 다세 류르바 다바스마도 다비기 나치마도 류코로 다래요 말에 선배삼다데 자도르지디 차고르와.
To summarize then this session, so here we spoke about the three different lineages of bodhisattvas. So those of definite Mahayana lineage, those of indefinite Mahayana and Theravadan lineage, and those of definite Theravadan lineage. And it was explained why of these three, that of definite Mahayana lineage will achieve Buddhahood before the other two types. And especially before that the practitioner of definite Theravadan lineage, that of the practitioner of definite Mahayana lineage will achieve Buddhahood long before even that foe destroyer does. And thereafter we looked at further explanation on the four types of observed objects, and we looked at why there are these four, and the purpose. We looked at that briefly here in the last section. So then how I suggest you engage in meditation before you come to the next session is to take what we've heard here today, that because those of definite Mahayana lineage will achieve Buddhahood first, we should strive to cultivate an ever stronger Mahayana lineage within ourselves through reflecting on love and compassion. And moreover, just like the bodhisattvas are not fooled by the confusion, the ignorance that confuses the self with the body, and we should strive to overcome this confusion, and do so through recognizing that it's through this confusion of mixing up the self with the body that all so much of our attachment arises, this desire for pleasure. And so we need to strive to overcome this confusion, so we can start to reflect on the fact that our body is not ourself, even though when we think of ourselves, there is always an image of the body that appears. Then we will continue in the next session with the way to perform this meditation. So thank you very much.